July 7, 1968, Wells Restaurant, Harlem. The king of Harlem collapses face first into his scrambled eggs. Heart attack. Bumpy Johnson, the man who made the Italian mafia bow, the legend who turned numbers into an empire, dead before the paramedics arrive. But in those 17 minutes of chaos, something else dies. Trust. Frank Lucas stands frozen against the brick wall, watching the coroner zip the body bag. He's not crying, he's not praying, he's hunting. His eyes scan every face in that crowd like a predator counting prey. The waitresses, the busboys, the hangers-on, the vultures. Because Frank knows what nobody else knows. Bumpy Johnson carried a small, leather-bound notebook everywhere. Black cover, gold clasp. 3 inches by 5 inches. No bigger than a prayer book, but worth more than every church in Harlem combined. Inside that book, 27 years of handwritten intelligence. The names of 17 corrupt NIP judges, private phone numbers of Genovese family capos, bank routing numbers through Panama, the exact location of the French Connection pipeline, the blueprint for a $50 million empire. But when Frank reaches for Bumpy's jacket, the moment every loyal soldier dreads, the breast pocket is empty. The book is gone. Frank faces the impossible choice: draw his gun, lock the doors, and turn this funeral into a massacre until someone confesses, or stay silent, stay loyal, and let the thief walk away with the keys to the kingdom. He chooses silence. Fatal mistake. Because the man who stole that notebook wasn't some desperate junkie looking for quick cash. It was someone in that room. Someone who knew exactly what they were taking. Someone who understood that in this world, information isn't power. Information is a loaded gun with unlimited bullets. For the next 10 years, while Frank Lucas builds the largest heroin empire America has ever seen, while he smuggles blue magic in the coffins of dead soldiers, while he makes $1 million per day, while he becomes untouchable, he carries a second obsession nobody talks about. The hunt for Bumpy's notebook. Not for sentiment, not for nostalgia, for survival. Because whoever took that book holds Frank's life in their hands. Every judge Frank bribes, every cop he pays off, every Italian he outsmarts, their names were already written in Bumpy's pages. The thief doesn't just know Frank's business, the thief knows Frank's future. And here's the nightmare that keeps Frank awake every night. If that book surfaces, if those names get published, if that intelligence hits the streets, Frank doesn't just lose his empire, he loses his life. The loud man dies first. The silent man dies second. But the man with the notebook? He decides who dies when. This is the story of the invisible war, the 10-year hunt. The search for the one weapon that could make Frank Lucas untouchable or get him buried next to his king. Breaking the fourth wall. If you think you know the Frank Lucas story, you're wrong. The movie showed you the rise and fall. But they never showed you the obsession, the paranoia, the decade-long search for the one thing that could save him or destroy him. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to learn will change everything you thought you knew about the King of Harlem. The throne was never about the drugs, it was never about the money. It was about the book. Harlem is quiet, but it's never silent. 20 stories up, in the soft yellow light of Bumpy Johnson's penthouse, the noise of the city shrinks to a whisper. Frank Lucas stands by the window, hands behind his back, watching streetlights flicker like dying stars. He's not dressed loud. Dark suit, dark tie, shine shoes. He looks like a driver, a nobody. But Bumpy knows better. June 16, 1968. 3 weeks before the King of Harlem takes his final breath. The most important conversation in the history of organized crime is about to happen behind a locked door. The air smells of expensive cigars and impending death. Bumpy Johnson sits in his leather chair like a man who already knows his expiration date. Oxygen tank by his side. Glass of cognac on the end table. Eyes sharp as broken glass, cutting through the fog of illness like headlights through smoke. "Close that curtain," Bumpy says, voice low, heavy with gravel. Frank does it without a word. The city disappears. Just the room now, the king, the student. "You hear that?" Bumpy asks. Frank listens. "I don't hear nothing, boss." Bumpy smiles. Slow, almost proud. "Exactly. That's the problem." He leans forward, wheezing slightly, but refuses the oxygen mask. "Noise, Frankie. That's all they know how to make. Italians. Politicians. Those clowns on 7th in their mink coats and pinky rings. They think if enough people say their name, that makes them kings." He taps his chest with 2 fingers. The silent man outlives them all. Bumpy pours 2 glasses of cognac. His hands shake slightly, but his voice remains steady as concrete. He doesn't ask Frank to sit. A king doesn't invite equals to his table until they've proven they belong there. Frank takes the glass, doesn't drink. He waits. Bumpy smiles at this. The boy has learned patience. "You know why the Italians will never respect us?" Bumpy asks, but it's not really a question. It's a sermon. It's not the skin. It's the hunger. They see hunger in our eyes, and hunger makes men predictable. A hungry man will do anything for a meal. A satisfied man chooses his battles. He takes a sip, lets the words settle like dust after a gunshot. The moment you stop being hungry and start being strategic, that's when they'll fear you. Fear is better than respect. Respect can be bought. Fear has to be earned. Frank finally drinks. The cognac burns, but he doesn't flinch. "You see Nicky Barnes?" Bumpy continues, voice dropping lower, more intimate, loud as a train wreck. Gold chains, fur coats, throwing money in nightclubs like he's watering plants. That boy's got 6 months before somebody puts a bullet in his head. You know why? Because he thinks being rich and being powerful are the same thing. They're not. Rich men drive Cadillacs. Powerful men decide who gets to drive. The room falls silent except for distant car horns floating up from below. Bumpy stands slowly, walks to his desk, opens the bottom drawer. Frank's eyes track every movement. This is the moment. The transfer of knowledge that separates soldiers from kings. Bumpy pulls out a small leather-bound notebook. Black cover. Gold clasp. No bigger than a prayer book. He holds it up between them like a priest holding communion, but he doesn't hand it over. He taps the cover twice with his index finger. "This is the difference between a king and a beggar," Bumpy says, eyes suddenly sharp. Memory fades. Paper doesn't. You remember every face you've ever seen, every promise made in a dark room, every debt owed, every favor traded, every throat you could cut if you needed to. He taps the notebook again. "This remembers for me." Frank stares at the book like it's a loaded gun. "What's inside?" Bumpy's smile is dangerous. "Everything. And nothing. Depends on who's reading it." He opens to a random page, shows Frank just enough to see handwriting, numbers, names. See, a fool would fill this with confessions. Evidence. A smart man fills it with leverage. He flips through pages slowly, each turn deliberate. Judge Halprin, March 2nd, 1958. Took $19,000 in a brown envelope at the Waldorf bathroom from Joseph Marino, Genovese earner. I got the time, the stall, the bills, serial numbers. Another page. Lieutenant Orr, badge 7431, took 15 keys from evidence in 61. Sold them back to me for 30 cents on the dollar. Frank's throat tightens. The air feels thicker. There's 17 judges in this book, Frankie. Federal agents who sell information for cash. Italian capos secretly buying from black suppliers, violating commission rules that would get them executed if exposed. Bank routing numbers through Panama, contact information for chemists in Hong Kong, poppy farmers in Thailand, corrupt military officials in Vietnam. Bumpy closes the book, holds it against his chest. Information isn't power, Frank. Applied information is power. And timing is everything. Frank's mind races, trying to memorize every detail of the book's appearance, trying to guess where Bumpy keeps it. But Bumpy sees this. He always sees everything. You're wondering where I hide it, Bumpy says. You're thinking you need to know, just in case something happens to me. And that's exactly why I'm not going to tell you. Because if you're ready to inherit this throne, you should already know where to look. If you don't know, then you're not ready. The lesson lands like a punch. Frank's jaw tightens, but he doesn't argue. Bumpy walks back to his chair, sits down slowly, suddenly looking every bit of his 62 years. The loud man dies first. The flashy man dies second. The silent man? The invisible man? He lives long enough to die in his bed. His voice becomes a whisper. That's the goal, Frank. Not to be famous. Not to be feared. To be underestimated right up until the moment you've already won. He slips the notebook back into his breast pocket. One day soon, somebody gonna offer you a choice. Noise or silence. Shine or shadow. You pick wrong, you die loud. You pick right, you live invisible. Invisible men are untouchable. Frank nods slowly. I ain't Nicky, boss. I ain't loud. Bumpy's eyes grow sad. Nobody thinks they the rat, Frankie. Nobody thinks they the clown. Until the cameras flash. Cut. Sharp clatter of silverware. Chair scraping tile. Wells Restaurant, July 7th, 1968, 3:17 a.m. The king of Harlem slumped over cold eggs and hotter secrets. Frank kneels on the sticky floor, one hand under Bumpy's head, feeling life slip away. The restaurant is chaos. Waitresses screaming. Cooks yelling for an ambulance. Mame crying. Bumpy's eyes flutter. He finds Frank's face. For a second, the noise disappears. Frank. Bumpy rasps. Frank leans closer. I'm here, boss. Bumpy's breath is shallow, each word costing him. Find the silence, Frank. The book knows the way. His hand twitches toward his chest, toward the inside pocket of his jacket. Then nothing. The line goes dead. Frank moves fast, but not loud, fingers slipping into the breast pocket where the weight should be. Where the notebook always lived. Where the keys to the kingdom waited. Empty. No leather. No gold clasp. No throne. For the first time in 15 years, Frank feels it. He's not a king. He's not a general. He's a soldier in a room where the real war just started. And whoever holds that notebook, they're already 3 moves ahead. The test has begun. And Frank has already failed. The vacuum of power isn't empty space. It's a mouth. And the moment Bumpy Johnson hit the floor at Wells Restaurant, that mouth opened wide to swallow Harlem whole. They wasted no time. The funeral flowers hadn't even wilted before the wolves arrived. 4 days after Bumpy's death, Frank gets the call. Not a request. A summons. The message is delivered by a kid who can't be older than 17, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big, and eyes that won't meet Frank's. The meeting happens at a cheap diner on Amsterdam Avenue. Frank sits across from an Italian emissary with slicked back hair and a $30 tie who speaks like he's ordering lunch. The man stirs sugar into his espresso, each rotation of the spoon deliberate, calculated. 60%, the guy says, not looking up from his cup. Frank stares at him. Calm. No blinking. You gave Bumpy how much? The emissary laughs, too loud for the small room. Bumpy was Bumpy. Different time, different man. You're a driver. You should be grateful we even talked to you. Right there. In that one sentence, the shift. Under Bumpy, Frank was the shadow that moved the city. Now, to them, he's back to being nobody. The Genovese and Gambino families smell blood in the water. Bumpy's gone. The notebook is gone. Harlem, to them, is just another colony to harvest. Let me get this straight, Frank says quietly. You want 60% of everything moving in Harlem. Everything. The Italian confirms. Numbers, dope. Protection. You kick up, you eat. You don't kick up, you starve. Or you disappear. He stands, drops crumpled dollars on the table, leans in close, and don't go looking for any old leverage you think Bumpy had. Whatever he was holding, it ain't yours. Then he's gone. Door chime. Street noise. Draft of cold air carrying the scent of Frank's obsolescence. The chaos starts immediately. Nature abhors a vacuum, and Harlem is no different. Within 2 weeks, 3 different gangsters try to claim Bumpy's crown. Leroy Nicky Barnes is the loudest. 26 years old, sharp dresser, big mouth. He throws a party at Small's Paradise, rents out the whole club, buys champagne for everyone like he's watering plants, announces himself as the new king of Harlem like it's an elected position. Frank watches from across the street, doesn't go inside, just watches Nicky through the window, laughing, dancing, flashbulbs popping. Frank thinks about Bumpy's words. The loud man dies first. 6 weeks later, Nicky gets arrested. Not killed, worse. Arrested and released on bail that's suspiciously low. Frank knows what that means. Nicky made a deal. The crown was never his because he never understood the first rule. Silence. 2 other pretenders rise and fall within months. Ace Washington gets found in his Cadillac, 2 in the head, engine still running. Another loudmouth ends up face down in a stairwell, pockets turned inside out, wristwatch missing. Everybody calls it the Italian's cleaning house. Frank isn't so sure, because while the fake bosses play dress up, he's on a different timeline. He's tearing apart Bumpy's world 1 brick at a time, hunting for the missing Bible. He starts with the penthouse. Drawers, vents, hollow walls. He rips open couch cushions, unscrews light fixtures, peels back wallpaper. Nothing. Mame stands in the doorway, arms crossed, grief carved into her face like stone. "What are you looking for, Frank?" she asks. "Answers," he says, still checking behind the dresser. "Bumpy already gave you those. If you didn't listen, a notebook won't help you now." Her words sting more than any Italian insult. He leaves with dust on his suit and nothing in his hands. Frank escalates the hunt. He hires private investigators, men who usually work divorce cases, and pays them triple to track shadows. He pours cash into the streets, turning junkies into surveillance cameras. He personally breaks into rival gangsters' homes, not to steal, but to search. Every meeting with Italians who once feared Bumpy feels different now. They don't fear him. They patronize him. The respect is gone. The invisible gun that kept enemies at bay has vanished with the notebook. Then the pattern emerges. The silence starts fighting back. Tommy Riles, a busboy at Wells' restaurant, tells his girlfriend he saw a woman in a nice coat reach into Bumpy's jacket while everyone was panicking. 2 days later, Tommy floats up near the Brooklyn Bridge. Drowning, the coroner says. Accidental. Detective Lou Brody, the cop who processed Bumpy's personal effects, agrees to meet Frank in a park in Queens. Brody wants $5,000 for information. Frank brings the cash. Brody never shows. His body is found 3 blocks away, shot twice in the back of the head. Robbery, the precinct report says. Wrong place, wrong time. A dirty cop from the 28th Precinct, a man who had been on Bumpy's payroll for a decade, sends word that he has recovered personal effects from the scene. Frank drives to the meet spot under the bridge. heart hammering against his ribs. He finds the cop's car. Engine running, driver's side window shattered. The cop slumped over the wheel, hole in his temple. The glove box open. Empty. Frank starts sleeping with his gun under his pillow. He stops eating at restaurants. He changes cars every week. Because the message is clearer than neon, stop looking. Someone is protecting that book with professional violence. Someone who knows his every move. Someone who understands that if Frank Lucas gets his hands on those names, the 60% tax would vanish overnight. Frank realizes the terrible truth sitting in his car, watching rain blur the city lights. The notebook wasn't just information, it was currency. It was the difference between being a king and being a beggar. Without it, he's naked in a blizzard. Every negotiation with corrupt cops who once took orders from Bumpy now feels like begging. The notebook was the invisible gun on the table. Now? The Italians look at Frank with boredom. They check their watches while he speaks. Most men would quit. Most men would take a knee, pay the tax, accept their place as servants. But Frank isn't most men. He's Bumpy's student, and he remembers the lesson. If the game is rigged, stop playing. Build a new game. He drives to a travel agency in Midtown, doesn't look at brochures for Paris or Rome. He spreads a map of Southeast Asia across his kitchen table. His finger traces a line from New York to the Golden Triangle, to Vietnam, to the source. If he can't inherit Bumpy's kingdom, he'll build a new one that renders the old rules obsolete. He doesn't need the Italians. He doesn't need the commission. He doesn't even need the notebook, not yet. He needs a product so pure, so cheap, so abundant, that the Italians will be forced to come to him. The notebook hunt isn't over. It's just paused. Frank Lucas is done looking for ghosts in Harlem. He's about to become one himself. The student is dead. The teacher is about to be born, and the lesson he's about to teach the mafia will rewrite every rule they thought they knew about power. The vacuum of power opened its mouth to swallow Frank Lucas. Instead, he's about to feed it something that will choke it silent. The jungle breathes different than Harlem. It exhales rot and rain and revolution. Frank Lucas steps off the military transport into the thick, wet heat of Bangkok, and for the first time in his life, the streets of New York feel like a neighborhood corner. This is the source. This is where empires are born, not inherited. November 1969. While the Italians back home argue over slices of a shrinking pie, Frank is about to rewrite the recipe entirely. He sits across from his cousin, Sergeant Leslie Ike Atkinson, in a bar that caters to soldiers looking to forget they might die tomorrow. The air conditioning doesn't work, the beer is warm, the conversation is ice cold. You really think you can move this much back home? Ike asks, testing him. Frank leans forward, voice steady as concrete. The Italians been cutting their products so hard, junkies in Harlem are shooting sugar water. You hand me 98% pure, straight from the Golden Triangle, I don't just own the streets. I own the supply chain. I own the future. Ike studies his cousin's face. And the French connection? The Corsicans? The Chinese? You think they just step aside because some boy from North Carolina shows up with American dollars? Frank's eyes go dead calm. I ain't asking them to step aside, Ike. I'm stepping around. You got access to the bases, the planes, the dead. We use that. The word hangs in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. The dead. Because in war, the one thing nobody dares inspect is a flag-draped coffin coming home. The mechanics are brutal in their simplicity. Frank meets with a corrupt major who likes money more than he likes rules. They shake hands in a back room that smells like diesel fuel and moral compromise. Hollowed-out coffins, false bottoms, wooden compartments lined with plastic and patriotism, bricks of 98% pure heroin, sealed and silent, riding home under the bodies of fallen soldiers. The ultimate camouflage. Grief as packaging. Frank returns to New York not as Bumpy's driver, not as a local hustler, but as something the underworld has never seen before. An importer. A man with a direct pipeline to the source. When blue magic hits Harlem, it doesn't just change the game, it burns the rule book and writes a new one in smoke. The product is white as fresh snow and pure as a prayer. The competition has been selling garbage stepped on 5 times by 5 different hands, cutting 90% pure down to 10% poison. Frank's blue magic is so potent that junkies who've been using Italian trash for years overdose on their first hit because they don't know what real heroin feels like. He has to tell his dealers to cut it down to 70% just to keep customers alive long enough to buy more. The money doesn't trickle in, it floods. $10,000 a day becomes $50,000. 50 becomes 200. By mid-1971, Frank Lucas is clearing $1 million per day in profit. Cash money. Paper stacked in closets and basements and safe houses across 3 boroughs. He buys a mansion in New Jersey, not Harlem. Visibility in one place, invisibility in another. He marries. He moves his family to the suburbs. He wears suits more expensive than most people's annual salaries. But he's not loud, not yet. He refuses interviews. He stays out of nightclubs. No drinking, no drugs. Church on Sundays. The myth builds around a ghost who runs the city in daylight. But while the visible empire rises like a golden tower, the invisible one keeps grinding in the shadows. Frank never stops hunting the notebook. The obsession eats at him like acid, burning through every victory, poisoning every triumph. He uses his new wealth like a scalpel, cutting through the city's information networks. He hires private investigators across 3 states. He buys corrupt FBI agents who search evidence rooms and listen to wiretaps. He spreads cash so wide that the entire eastern seaboard becomes his rumor mill. Every week, he spends $50,000 chasing shadows. The search becomes more expensive than some people's entire operations. The contrast is suffocating. Frank has more money than Bumpy ever dreamed of, but he lacks the legitimacy that the notebook represented. The difference shows in every meeting, every negotiation, every transaction. Bumpy could walk into a judge's chambers, and the judge would sweat without a word being spoken. Frank has to bring briefcases full of cash. Bumpy ruled with secrets. Frank rules with money. And money is loud. He feels it when he sits across from Dominic Catano, a Gambino captain, in a restaurant in Little Italy. The same man who once told Frank to be grateful for scraps now sits with his hands folded like he's praying for salvation. "Your product is the best I've ever seen," Dominic says, practically begging. "My people are starving out there. Everyone wants blue magic. We can move 5 keys a week, maybe 10. Frank sips his espresso, lets the silence stretch like a noose. 15 keys. Cash, up front. No credit, no exceptions. Dominic nods too quickly. "Done. Whatever you need. This is power. This is the throne." But even as Frank watches the Italian squirm, he feels the absence gnawing at him. The notebook would have given him this moment without the risk. The notebook would have meant he didn't need to meet Dominic at all. He could have sent a message, and Dominic would have obeyed out of fear, not greed. Frank is buying loyalty now, not earning respect. He's bribing judges with envelopes of cash instead of blackmail. It's more expensive. It's riskier. Every transaction leaves a trail. Every payoff is a potential witness. Frank is winning. But he's winning loud, and loud men die first. Then, February 1973, the crack in the wall appears. An old numbers runner named Samuel Preach Williams dying of lung cancer, asks to meet Frank at a church in Harlem. Frank goes alone, slides into the pew beside a man who looks like he's already halfway through heaven's gate. "I was there," Preach whispers, voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "The night Bumpy died, in the back corner, by the kitchen door. I saw something I shouldn't have." Frank's pulse quickens, but his face stays stone. "What did you see?" "Not the theft. The thief." Preach coughs, wet and painful, each word costing him breath he can't spare. "While you was holding him, while everybody was screaming and crying, somebody walked up calm as Sunday morning, reached into his jacket, slid something out smooth like they'd done it 100 times before." Frank leans closer. "Who?" Preach's eyes shine with guilt and fear. "That's what I've been carrying all these years. It wasn't no stranger, Frank. Wasn't no cop. Wasn't no Italian looking for an opportunity. It was family. Someone who ate at his table. Someone who knew exactly what they were taking and exactly where to find it. Give me a name, Preach." The old man shakes his head, but his hand trembles as he speaks. "I saw a ring. Gold band. Ruby in the center. The hand was fast, Frank. Too fast. Like a magician making something disappear. Before Frank can press him further, before he can squeeze the name out of him, Preach starts coughing harder. His chest seizes. His hand claws at the air like he's trying to grab one last winning number. Then he slumps forward. Done. Frank sits in the empty church, staring at the altar, the description burning in his mind. A gold ring with a ruby. He knows that ring. He's seen it. But his mind refuses to accept where, refuses to connect the dots that would shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty. 2 days later, March 15th, 1973, the message arrives. Frank is in his New Jersey mansion, standing in his office that overlooks manicured lawns and the kind of suburban peace that money can buy. Rain hammers the windows like bullets. The doorbell cuts through the storm like a scream. He opens the door to find nobody there, just a plain brown envelope on the wet welcome mat, wrapped in plastic to protect it from the weather. No return address, no courier in sight. The street is empty except for the rain. Frank takes the package to his study, locks the door, sets it on his mahogany desk like it's ticking. He cuts the twine with a silver letter opener, unwraps the plastic with the care of a bomb technician. Inside is a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. Torn, not cut, from a small notebook. The edges are rough, deliberate. Frank's blood turns to ice water. He recognizes the handwriting immediately. Bumpy's tight, controlled script that looked like it was carved rather than written. 5 names listed in fading blue ink: Raymond Big Ray Tatum, 1969, Louise Hendricks, 1970. Detective Arnold Klein, 1971, Vincent Vinnie Baggs Esposito, 1972, Julius Grant, 1973. Frank stares at the list, his hands beginning to shake. He knows these names. All of them. Big Ray was a loan shark who tried to muscle in on Bumpy's territory. Louise was a numbers runner who skimmed from the take. Detective Klein was a dirty cop who tried to play both sides. Vinnie Baggs was an Italian soldier who disrespected Bumpy in public. Julius Grant was a lieutenant who got greedy and started his own operation. All dead. All within the last 5 years. All killed in ways that looked like accidents or random crime. Car crashes, house fires, heart attacks, muggings gone wrong, subway accidents. But it's what's written at the bottom of the page that makes Frank drop the paper like it's on fire. Fresh black ink, elegant handwriting that definitely isn't Bumpy's. You're getting too loud, Frank. Remember the lesson. The room spins around him. The notebook isn't lost. It isn't gathering dust in some evidence locker. It's alive. It's active. Someone has been systematically crossing names off Bumpy's list. eliminating his enemies with the patience of a chess master and the precision of a surgeon. And now they're watching Frank. They know where he lives. They know he's been searching. They know he's getting too visible, too flashy, too loud. Frank walks to his window, stares out into the dark, rainy night. For the first time since he left the jungle, the king of Harlem feels the cold breath of fear on his neck. He's built an empire that generates $1 million a day, but he's standing on a trapdoor. And someone else, someone who was supposed to be family, has their finger on the lever. The notebook isn't hunting him yet, but it's watching, and Frank Lucas, master of the invisible empire, realizes he's about to learn the hardest lesson of all. In this game, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one you can see coming. It's the one who's been sitting at your table all along, wearing a gold ring with a ruby center, waiting for the perfect moment to make you disappear. The loud man dies first. Frank is getting very, very loud, and somewhere in the shadows, someone is keeping score. Noise. That's what kills kings. For 6 years, Frank Lucas moved like smoke through the city. Money flowed silent. Bodies disappeared quiet. The empire grew in shadows, fat and invisible. Then November 30th, 1975, he decides to shine. Madison Square Garden. Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. The whole world watching. And Frank Lucas steps out of his limousine wearing hubris tailored in chinchilla, $100,000 of fur, white as fresh cocaine, soft as a whispered threat. The coat doesn't just cover Frank's shoulders, it announces his arrival like a trumpet blast in a funeral parlor. He walks to the front row, better seats than the Italian bosses, better seats than the politicians, better seats than anyone who earned their money quiet. The cameras love him. Flashbulbs pop like gunfire. For 17 seconds, Frank Lucas forgets every lesson Bumpy Johnson ever taught him about the difference between power and performance. The next morning, his face stares back from newspaper stands across 5 boroughs. Not buried in the crime section. Front page. Above the fold. The headline reads, Mystery Man in 100K, Coat Steals Spotlight. In a cramped Newark office, Detective Richie Roberts cuts out the photo with scissors, pins it to his corkboard, and studies it like a treasure map. He's been chasing shadows for 2 years, trying to identify the source of heroin so pure it's dropping bodies from Harlem to Philadelphia. Now he has a face. Now he has a target stupid enough to announce himself to the world. But Roberts isn't working alone. Someone made sure that photograph landed on the right desk. Someone wanted Frank Lucas visible, loud, and vulnerable. The hunt begins with surgical precision that speaks to intimate knowledge. The raids start 3 months later. February 1976. Coordinated strikes across 5 states. The feds don't just know where Frank's money is hidden, they know his distribution schedules, his courier routes, his safe house rotations. They hit 17 locations simultaneously, seizing product worth $12 million and cash totaling $4.7 million. The intelligence is too perfect, too complete, too personal. Frank sits in his New Jersey mansion watching through bulletproof windows as unmarked cars surround his property like wolves circling wounded prey. He doesn't run. Running is for men who believe they have somewhere to go. When they cuff him, Detective Roberts reads the charges in a voice that sounds almost apologetic. The King of Harlem, reduced to inventory numbers and federal statutes. In the interrogation room, the evidence spreads across the table like a dissection. Photographs of his operation. Transcripts of conversations he thought were private. Bank account numbers in 3 countries. The names of 17 judges on his payroll. police badge numbers, distribution routes mapped with military precision. Frank stares at the files, recognizing the architecture of his own destruction. This isn't police work, this is prophecy fulfilled. Someone didn't just tip off the cops, someone handed them a blueprint written in Bumpy's handwriting. Every route Frank used, Bumpy had taught him. Every safe house Frank established, Bumpy had suggested the location. The notebook wasn't just intelligence about enemies, it was a mirror reflecting the student's patterns, weaknesses, and inevitable downfall. The feds offer the deal. 70 years or cooperation. Frank refuses, loyalty above all else. That's Bumpy's code. Rats die alone and hated. Kings die silent. Then his lawyer brings the message. A plain white envelope, no return address. Inside, elegant handwriting that makes Frank's blood turn to ice water. The notebook is safe. Cooperate and you'll never see it again. Refuse and it goes public. Every name, every judge, every cop, everyone burns, including your family still on the streets. Frank reads the words 3 times, hands trembling. The threat isn't about him anymore. It's about total exposure. If that notebook hits daylight, it destroys the entire infrastructure Bumpy spent 30 years building. Judges get indicted. Cops get murdered. Italian families go to war. Politicians commit suicide, and Frank's brothers, his remaining soldiers in Harlem, become targets in a conflict they can't survive. The binary opposition crushes him like concrete. King versus rat, loyalty versus survival, honor versus pragmatism. Every lesson Bumpy taught him screams refuse, stay silent, do the time, die with dignity. But the notebook changes the equation. Silence now means destruction for everyone whose names live in those pages. Frank makes the call. He tells Roberts he'll cooperate. He'll testify. He'll name names. Not to save himself, to save the notebook's secrets, to protect Bumpy's legacy from nuclear exposure, to keep his family from becoming casualties in a war they didn't choose. When he signs the cooperation agreement, his hand doesn't shake, his voice doesn't crack. But late at night, in the silence of his federal cell, Frank Lucas stares at the ceiling and faces the question that will haunt him for 40 years. Did he just prove himself worthy of inheriting Bumpy's throne by making the strategic sacrifice? Or did he prove he was never worthy at all by becoming exactly what his mentor warned him never to be? A man who chose survival over silence, pragmatism over principle, life over legend. The loud man dies first. Frank wore the chinchilla coat and became visible, but somewhere in the shadows, the person holding Bumpy's notebook, the invisible hand that orchestrated his fall, that weaponized wisdom against him, remains untouchable. The coat cost Frank his empire. But the real price was the moment he looked in the mirror and realized he had become the rat he swore he'd never be. And the notebook? Still out there. Still watching. Still waiting for the final chapter to write itself. Prison takes your name first, then your time, then your noise. By 1984, when the federal gates finally swing open for Frank Lucas, there's no empire waiting outside, no soldiers lined up in respect, no chinchilla coats, just gray sky and a bus schedule back to nowhere. He emerges thinner, older, but his eyes still carry the same calculation. Not hunger for money anymore. Hunger for meaning. For answers. The king of Harlem steps into a world that forgot him on purpose. The streets he once ruled now belong to crack and chaos. Kids with Uzis who never heard of codes or respect. His empire is ash. His money is gone. The legends whisper his name, but the new generation thinks Frank Lucas is just a story old men tell when the bars close. He lives quiet in New Jersey. 1-bedroom apartment. Government check. Some days he works odd jobs, other days he just walks like a ghost who remembers being a king. The only thing that never died, never weakened, is the obsession. The notebook. He still feels it like a missing tooth his tongue can't stop touching. Who had it? Who used it? Who sent the warnings? The hunt continues, quieter now, more desperate. He's not searching for power anymore, he's searching for closure. Then, April 12, 1991. The phone rings at 7 in the morning. Frank answers, expecting nothing. Instead, a voice identifies itself as Martin Greenberg, attorney representing the estate of Mame Johnson. Bumpy's widow died 3 weeks ago. Natural cause, 81 years old. In her will, she left something specifically for Frank Lucas. Frank drives to Harlem with hands that won't stop trembling. 23 years since Bumpy died, 23 years of searching, surviving, suffering. The lawyer's office smells like old books and older secrets. Greenberg slides a small package across the mahogany desk. Brown paper. Twine wrapped tight, Frank's name in Mamie's elegant cursive. He doesn't open it in the office. He carries it to Riverside Park, sits on a bench overlooking the Hudson River where the water moves like time itself, constant and indifferent. He unwraps slowly. Inside, wrapped in silk cloth gone yellow with age, is the notebook. Black leather, gold clasp, 3 inches by 5 inches, exactly as he remembered. For a moment, Frank can't breathe. There's a letter tucked inside the front cover. Mame's handwriting, dated 2 months before her death. Dear Frank, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I took it that night at the restaurant. While you held him, while everyone panicked. Bumpy told me what to do if something happened to him. He said, if Frank comes looking for this, don't give it to him. Make him wait. Make him build his own empire first. Make him prove he's worthy. Make him survive becoming everything he hates. And if he's still standing 20 years later, give it to him. Because then he'll understand what it really is. This was his final gift, Frank. I hope you understand it now. Frank opens the notebook with trembling hands, page after page of Bumpy's tight handwriting. Names of judges, most now dead or retired. Police badge numbers from departments reorganized 3 times over. Italian contacts from families scattered by RICO prosecutions. Overseas connections to operations raided and shut down decades ago. Bank account numbers from institutions that no longer exist. The information is worthless, completely, utterly obsolete. The empire it described died with Bumpy. Frank could publish every page and it wouldn't matter. The world moved on, the players changed, the game evolved. The real lesson hits him like a bullet. The notebook was never about the information. It was about the discipline, the wisdom, the understanding that true power operates in silence, that empires built on noise collapse. That loyalty isn't about never betraying others, it's about never betraying the principles that make you who you are. Frank pulls out his lighter, flicks it once. The flame dances in the spring breeze. He burns it page by page, watching Bumpy's handwriting curl and blacken. Names disappear. Numbers evaporate. Secrets transform into smoke that the wind carries toward the city that made him and broke him and taught him. When the last page burns, Frank scatters the ashes into the Hudson. The notebook was a test of character disguised as a tool of power. And Frank passed, not by finding it, but by surviving without it. Not by using it, but by burning it. If you held the secrets that could destroy your enemies and elevate yourself to untouchable status, would you use them? Or would you have the wisdom to let them burn? Because in this life, the difference between a king and a legend isn't what you take, it's what you choose to leave behind.